This is episode 111 of the Trauma Coaching for Latter-day Saints podcast, Push, Pull, Sink, Rise. I'm your host, Anita Bremer. I'm a Latter-day Saint mom with a history of trauma. I use my own life experience and spiritual gifts, as well as mindset and somatic tools to help you trade ashes for beauty and end generational trauma. Let's talk about what it takes to truly heal and find lasting joy from the perspective of your nervous systems. Okay, we are officially back from winter break. It's the second week of January. Kids are back to school. Actually, my kids go back to school tomorrow. We're back at work. Are you all ready for 2023? I have to admit, I don't feel like I'm really ready. I kind of wanted to clean my office before I was ready, but here we are. So, we're going to follow up from last week's episode about sacrifice and consecration and reflecting on what can we let go of and what can we dedicate and develop this year. I had a totally different topic planned, but this came to me and it felt like the thing that wanted to be spoken out loud. And so here we are. You're going to be hearing a lot about my personal journey with my goal this year, which is to wake up and get out of bed earlier. It's something that I have worked on pretty much my whole life. Well, something that I've struggled with pretty much my whole life. I've started working on it when my first baby was born almost 20 years ago. So I have quite a history. I have almost 2 decades of trying different things, giving up, back and forth over and over again. And I don't know, but this year feels different. It feels like I have the tools, I have the mindset, I have understandings. A lot of the work that I've done on myself with my own trauma, I realized that sleep has been a way for me to shut down and to get away from the difficult emotions in my life that became kind of a habit. So I have a lot more context and understanding than I ever have before in my life. And I also have something else, which is a compelling reason. I have wanted to create a habit of waking up earlier, getting up earlier for, like I said, the better part of 2 decades. But it was like I was doing it because I thought I should. And now I want to do it because I feel this pull, this call from the spirit to create more space and time in my life to be with scripture, in prayer, in meditation, connecting in with myself. And that feels like a much more compelling reason than, well, other successful people seem like that's what they do, right? And it really got me thinking about how I feel first thing in the morning, which when I first wake up, I always have this push and this pull within me. I feel pushed to get out of bed, to start the day, to be productive, but I feel pulled to stay in bed, to rest just a little bit more, one more minute, one more minute. And honestly, it kind of feels like it's this space where I get to just be myself. This push and this pull create a tension within me. And my coach, who works a lot with somatics, encouraged me once as we were talking about this feeling of a push and a pull inside of my body to actually do a push pull. And the way I do this is I have one arm extended out. I usually start with my left arm extended out with my palm facing myself, and my right arm with my palm facing outward, but at my shoulder. And I pull my left arm in as I push my right arm out. And I don't just sort of move my arms, I really pretend like my right arm is pushing against something and my left arm is pulling something, right? So I activate those muscles and I really push and pull. And then when my hands switch places, I turn my palms around and I swap. And I do that a few times. Sometimes when I remember to do that first thing in the morning before I've even gotten out of bed, it really helps. I feel it helps relieve the tension inside of my body. It's like something happens when we move our bodies that energy has a place to go. And then it's like this settling, like, oh, okay, now I can start my day. And so I was pondering about that. And I realized that there are other areas of my life, other things in my life that cause me to feel either a push or a pull or both. Or as I was considering this, I thought about things that, like, I tend to want to avoid the things that feel pushy to me, and I want to move towards the things that feel like a pull. And I'll speak more about that in a moment. But there are some things that feel like a pull, but also feel like a sinking, like it's bringing me down. It's slowing me down. And so then I got to thinking about, so push and pull are kind of lateral, but sinking and rising are vertical. And I think it's important to consider both of these things because we don't want to just focus on something that is pulling us if it's also sinking us, right? We want to really lean into the things that are pulling and are inviting us to rise. And sometimes the things that are pushing also invite us to rise. And in those cases, you might consciously, deliberately choose them anyway, even though they feel like a push. And I tend to not like that pushing feeling, but maybe for you, you prefer push and to pull. So there's a lot of like considering here, what does this thing feel like? And we'll go over some examples. But what I'm going to do for this episode is actually introduce each of the journaling questions and answer them myself so that you can get a feel for what I'm talking about and what some things that fall under these categories might be for you. Now, before I get started on that, if you want to get a little fancy, you can actually put these answers on a quadrant. So take a piece of paper or a whiteboard or whatever and divide it into 4 parts. So divide vertically in half and horizontally in half. And across the top, one column label push and the next column label pull. And then to the left or to the right, whatever, um, on the top, put rise, and on the bottom, put what did I call it? Fall? Um, sink. I called it sink and rise. So on the bottom, put sink. So, because there's going to be some overlap here, right? Like I said, push and pull are lateral and sink and rise are vertical. And we want to focus on the quadrant that is pull and rise. And I'll tell you why that is. So, first of all, what is pulling you? And when I think of this, when I think of the things that pull me, it's like the things that I want to do, the things that, oh, I wish I had more time for that. If only I could, right? Those are some of the basic thoughts that go along with this feeling in my body of feeling pulled. And I also want you to identify, what does that feel like in your body? When you desire something, or when there's that little whisper, that spiritual whisper of like, come, right? Do this. And it's not forceful, but it's like this little pull, this little nudge, maybe. I don't know. I kind of think of nudging in terms of pushing, but for me, that pull feels like it's right in the center of my chest and my gut, kind of maybe that solar plexus area. And it feels like an expansion, like an opening, but like a pulling outward, almost like I just want to move my whole body forward. Right. So, some of the things I think about when I feel this feeling, the first thing that came to my mind was I feel pulled towards simplicity, paring down, focusing on fewer things. It's just like, it's this urge almost to go through all my things and get rid of things and make space. And that's just like a pull. Like, I know I don't have to do that, but I feel compelled to do that. I feel pulled toward waking up earlier And I mentioned that a little bit. I have felt pushed in the past to waking up earlier, but right now it feels like a pull. It feels like a little whisper, a little opening. It doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't feel loud. It feels like an opportunity. I feel pulled when I think about this podcast. Now, this episode is coming to you late because I've been busy spending time with my daughter who went away back to college a couple days ago, just letting myself rest. We're in the middle of a bathroom remodel that I really wanted to complete as much as possible before the break was over. And I just didn't feel pulled in those days leading up to when I would normally be recording this podcast to sit down and record. But overall with my podcast, I feel pulled to do it. I know I don't have to do it. And I know I don't have to publish episodes every week or on the same day every week. But I feel pulled to do that. It feels right. When I think about this group coaching program that I'm offering starting February 1st, you should totally come join me. It's going to be amazing. And the only reason I know that is because the Spirit tells me so. But I feel pulled to it. And if I'm being completely honest, I feel a little inadequate, a little like, I don't know what I'm doing. And what is this going to be? It's a little bit of a different group. I've done a few different small groups in the past. They've all been based in mindset. And this group, I want it to be based in somatic work. I want it to be based in noticing our bodies because here's my thought. And maybe this is a terrible thought, but it feels good to me at the moment. I feel like there are thousands and thousands of mindset coaches, but there are not as many coaches that will help you really process emotions, notice your body, slow down. It requires more skill, in my opinion. It requires me to be really embodied as the coach, as the practitioner. And it requires some co-regulation, some noticing of the environment and what's between us. And I'm here for you and you're here for me. There's sort of this co-creation. It's not the same as just like, let's look at your thoughts and how does that thought feel? It feels a lot slower. And like it's because of that reason, it feels like it is harder to kind of scale to do in larger groups. I do believe we can do it in groups and that we'll get a lot out of it, but it feels like it's a slower work. And so progress might be a little slower, although I tend to think of it on in terms of an exponential curve where it feels really slow until there's this moment where the curve just goes up and then it's fast. Um, and it feels like it's more needed in the world at this time, at least for myself and for the people I tend to work with. And so I'm really excited. I feel pulled toward this group. I do not feel pushed toward this group. I really feel a pull, like it's something outside of me that is saying, do this group, start this group. So if you're interested in that, I'll give more details at the end of the episode. I feel pulled toward being in my scriptures, being in meditation and in prayer. And I really feel pulled toward building relationships right now. So, business relationships, personal relationships. I just feel like I'm in this phase of relationships. And I feel a strong pull to do my own work, to continue my own work in healing my own trauma. And another really great example is this habit I have of going on walks. I usually go on 30, 45-minute walk every day. And that is not something that I've done my whole life. It's only been in the last couple of years that I've really had a good habit of that. And it's because I feel pulled when it's been a while since I've walked. It's like the trees are calling me, right? I just feel like, oh, I just got to get out and walk. And that's the feeling I'm talking about. In this way, I feel pulled to waking up earlier. But I'll talk about also waking up earlier also falls under the category of feeling pushed sometimes. So it's sort of in the middle there. So let's talk about the push sensation. When I feel like something's pushing me, it usually goes along with sentences like I have to or I should, those kinds of things, right? That's when I feel pushed. And this push to me, it feels like a bulging outward in my chest. It feels like my whole body is rigid and tight. It's like, "Mm," like somebody's pushing me, but I don't want to go, right? I'm trying to resist their pushing and they're shoving me forward. And what I notice the most around this feeling is anything having to do with, I kind of want to say productivity, but I think it's specifically anything having to do with household chores. For years and years, that was like my thing. I spent most of my energy and effort on keeping my house really clean and in order, and everything was like in its spot and everything was very efficient, that kind of thing. But now that I have a business, it's like, okay, that's good and fine. And I still really appreciate it when my house is clean and in order. But I feel pushed to make dinner or do laundry or all those chores kinds of things. And I have a really good setup, I think. My son does a lot of the main floor chores that I don't even have to do, but eventually like someone has to at least clean the bathroom, our master bathroom, right? And I don't feel like that should be my son. I mean, maybe I could offer him, would you want to do this job and I'll pay you for it? But it usually comes down to me. And it's like there's a part of me that wants a clean bathroom, right? But then there's the part of me that doesn't want to be the one to do it, right? So really anything in that category of household chores, it's a push. It's a push for me that I like have to force myself to do it. And then the other thing I noticed as I was reflecting on this idea of a push versus a pull is there are lots of coaches and programs and books that I would love to hire and participate in and read, right? But it's like too much. And I have this pull, like I said earlier, to the simplicity, to the paring down, to the focusing on fewer things. So when I think of like, oh, I'd love to hire that coach, I notice that sensation in my chest coming up like a push. Now, like I said, some things, sometimes they feel like a pull and sometimes they feel like a push. And so you really have to just pay attention for yourself, which things fall under which category. And maybe it's in one and sometimes it's in the other. Um, Waking up earlier sometimes feels like a push, right? Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do that. And I just wanted to pause here and say, for me, it's waking up earlier. But for you, whatever it is you are working on, whatever your goal is, or whatever is like right at the front of your consciousness, just substitute that, right? Does it feel like a pull? Does it feel like a push for you? So I would put that both under push and pull, which is why it's helpful to also have the two quadrants that are for sink and rise, because I wouldn't put waking up earlier on the sink side. I think whether I'm feeling pushed or whether I'm feeling pulled to wake up earlier, it either way, it is a feeling that it will help me rise. It will help me become more of my true self. And so in this category of push, you might consider going through and thinking about, is it a push and a rise or a push and a sink? Because for me, like my kids' school, we're required to do a certain number of volunteer hours. I think it's 30 hours right now. Next year, it'll be 20 hours for me. But when I think about volunteering at the school, for the most part, it feels like a push. It feels like one of those household chore duties, right? But it also feels kind of like sinking. Like if I didn't have to do that, I would have more space and availability in my life. My calling feels like a push. It feels like I have to push myself to get to do my calling. It doesn't feel fun and exciting and like, oh, I want to do it. I enjoy the topic. I am the Teaching in the Savior's Way coordinator. I really enjoy that curriculum and the idea behind it, but I'm not getting a reciprocal response from many members of my ward. So it feels like I kind of have to push myself and I almost like I kind of have to push others as well. But I believe that we have callings for a reason. So that also goes under the push, but the rise quadrant for me. Um, Sometimes this program I'm in for trauma training, trauma coaching, most of the time it feels like a pull. It feels like something that I really want to do and I want to learn more and I would spend more time doing it. But every once in a while, it feels like a push. But it also feels like it is inviting me to rise. It's inviting me to become a better version of myself. So that's why how you can see that adding the dimension of rise and fall will help to clarify some things that I want to focus mostly on the quadrant that is pull and rise, the things that you feel pull toward and that are inviting you to rise, to become a better version of yourself. And then secondly, the things that maybe feel more like a push, but are also inviting you to rise. And maybe you would strategically choose. Oh, one thing I had on that list on the push and rise is ward choir. I've always been in ward choir since I was an adult, but recently I feel like I'm pushing myself to go because I should, because not very many people go, but I might not choose it if I didn't feel guilty for not going, right? But also, I love music and gospel music, and I feel like it really helps strengthen my testimony. So I put it under the rise, the push and the rise, right? So if I look at this list of things that feel like a push, but also feel like they're helping me rise, I might strategically drop some of them, right? Because I don't have time in my life for all of them. So now let's talk about the sink feeling. Um, the sinking feeling is like maybe the voice of that feeling would be this ugh. And the biggest one for me is social media or my phone. It's like I actually put that under the category of pull and under the category of sink because I do feel a pull toward getting on Instagram and scrolling and seeing how people are and reading comments, right? But when I'm done, it's like this, ugh, I spent how much time on that? And it's not just social media, it's like my phone in general, like my habit to like check this email, check this, check that, right? And I just don't want to be doing that. So for me, this sinking is like a heaviness. It's like I can feel my shoulders go down. I can kind of feel like my chest and my gut are like heavy. It's like, oh, I notice this feeling when I have some self judgment and when I notice urgency. Urgency feels like a push and a sinking. It's like heavy and sluggish and like forceful, right? So that's the quadrant push and sink that I want to get rid of all the things that are in that quadrant as much as possible, right? And I actually had a hard time finding things that felt like a push and a sink. I really spent some time thinking about what is that? Most of them, if I'm doing them, there's some kind of pull. But also it's like there are things that are holding me back, or that if I didn't do those things, I would have more space, more time, more energy, right? So I personally had a hard time finding things that were a push and a sink. Most everything was a pull or a push and a rise. I didn't talk about the feeling of the rise for me. When I think about this rise, it's like a what if that? Or like that little whisper of like, come, do this, wake up earlier, come read your scriptures, right? It's like that little tiny voice that's like hopeful and it's like an opportunity and it feels light and it feels like it helps me stand taller. That's what the rise feels like to me. So I hope this has helped you to reflect on things that are in your own life and things that feel both like a push or a pull or a sink or a rise. And I hope this is an invitation for you to completely strike out of your life as much as you can. There are going to be some things, like I did put volunteering at my kids' school under push and sink. And I'm going to spend some time thinking about how can I get creative with that? Can I just give myself permission to not do it? I mean, there's no like volunteer police, but it's sort of like something that I've committed to, right? And the other thing that falls under that category that's push and sink is like anything having to do with like productivity, right? It's just like, ugh. So, what can I delegate? What can I ignore? Right? Though that's the quadrant that try to get rid of those things as much as possible. The pull and the sink, maybe some of those things you choose to do anyway, very strategically. And but then really focus on the quadrant with the pull and the rise. And that's where your effort and your energy should be going. I'm going to just read these journaling questions one more time. Number one, what are you feeling pushed toward? Number two, what is pulling you? Number three, what is bringing you down? Number four, what is inviting you to rise? And number five, what sensations inside your body let you know that it's a push, a pull, a sinking, or a rising? Okay, so if you want to work with me this year, I really encourage you to check out Presence. It's going to be weekly somatic based coaching, and it's only $2,222. That's a steal for what I have seen in the industry. I mean, some people are charging upwards of $10,000 for a year of somatic based coaching. And I just really, really feel like no matter how inadequate and unprepared I feel like I am, and to be honest, there are things that qualify me for this. I'm not saying that I'm completely inadequate and unprepared. The parts that the spirit has spoken to me about that has shown me what this group could be like, I'm very excited about. I just think it will be a place of healing, a place of rest, a place of kind of going against the grain, working against culture, which is just a mighty fast moving river that, you know, sweeps us along. And you really have to be intentional about pushing out the things that push their way into your life, right? And I think that this group will be an hour to an hour and a half a week where you can feel a sense of ease, a sense of calm, a sense of safety. And that alone can be life changing. Imagine feeling safe and at ease and talking about your goals and things that you want in your relationships. Imagine how much progress you can make when you're in the right environment, right? So, this group will be very collaborative and encouraging and a safe place. It will also be a courageous space because I can't guarantee anybody's safety because somebody might say or do something that makes you feel unsafe. But if that's the case, then I would encourage you to, step back if you need to, but then think about why. What was it about the thing that person said that made me feel unsafe? Because that's where the real work is. The other way you can work with me is private coaching. I have two spots available right now that I'm pretty sure in the next week or two will be filled. Um, but there's always people coming in and out. So even if I don't have any spots, I really encourage you to come do a free session. The free session is the first step, and it helps you understand what it feels like to work with me as your coach. And if it doesn't feel safe, then I would encourage you to not hire me. You need a safe place, whether that's in a group or in private coaching or another coach or another situation. But I really encourage you to find a space that feels safe and encouraging where you can be yourself and work on your goals. It might be with me or it might be somewhere else. That's enough for now, and so are you. The impact I'm making in the world grows best by word of mouth. Would you please share this episode with someone this week? And if you're ready to address your own trauma with my support, Go to danitabrummer.com to schedule a free trauma assessment call. Until next time, go be yourself and follow the spirit.